Hello, everyone. I'm Mark,
And I'm Rob.
and welcome to Mark and Rob's Sports Showdown.
Mhm.
Please like and subscribe and make some comments down below. We appreciate your support.
Yes.
Today, 3 days ago, one of the most famous athletes of all time died, O.J. Simpson. And I guess the best way I always sum it up is that he seemed like a great, exciting running back and a nice guy and very charming until he killed two people and got away with it.
Hmm.
What were your thoughts about just for background purposes? I think we mentioned this in one other video. We both grew up in Rochester, New York, which is 65 miles from Buffalo, where OJ played most of his career, the Buffalo Bills. So that's the gate. That's the team that was on TV every week on NBC channel at the time. Uh, so just for background, so we have a unique perspective in the fact that we had the opportunity to see him on TV a lot
Up
during
close and
his
personal.
whole
Yeah.
career, and not a lot of people did because the way the especially back then when all you had was Sunday games and Monday night football. You didn't have Thursday night, stuff like that.
Right.
You didn't have Sunday night games. So if you weren't in a particular city, you didn't see most teams very often. So unless you saw a 4 o'clock game or something like that. So we were able to see him every week if we wanted to, and
Right.
I'll tell you about that in a minute. But tell me about your thoughts on the death of O.J. Simpson.
Yeah. He was a great athlete. Grew up in Potrero Hill, a rough area of San Francisco. I lived out in San Francisco for 13 years. Um, he went through a lot of things during his career, but I mean, and in your perspective, I kind of agree with you. So, he was very charming, and he did build up a kind of a persona for black athletes back then when it wasn't really a thing. So and then eventually got into commercials and acting. Um, I actually had a chance to see him personally. The football teams had a basketball camp in Niagara, and I went to a basketball camp there and got to see the players up live, and I got to see him. And and I do agree with one thing that Johnny Cochran did say about him is that he had a big head. He
In a
did.
big head.
He had a big head. So Johnny Cochran was correct.
Well,
He did have
I once I've heard that if if you have a big head, you actually look better on TV. You look more attractive and more appealing on
Oh
TV.
yeah, he definitely had a persona. He was perfect. But then if we want to get into as far as I mean, he like I said, he did build up and get the black athlete more noticed and more as far as commercials and being on TV. But then as far as I mean, if you asked most black people back then or even now, he was mostly to where we wouldn't call him black. We wouldn't call him black. And people use the word Uncle Tom, but I don't think he was that far. But let's just say we didn't portray him as really a black, so quote unquote black person after
Did
that.
it bother you and other black people that he seemed to somewhat abandon the black community and try very much to be in with the white community? He even took diction lessons in order to sound quote more white. And I'm not making that phrase up.
Well, I mean, it's okay. It's okay to take dictions, but I mean, the sound. I mean, a lot of not just black athletes. A lot of blacks do that. We call that forget where you came from. I grew up in Rochester, but I grew up in projects. But we ended up being out in the suburbs of around the Equate and went to school there. But I never forget who and where I came from. I will never change that. But some black people do. They just figure they think they're going to be. We're always going to be assimilated, but never accepted. That's just the way it is in this country. We'll be assimilated, but not accepted.
I find it interesting that he, didn't, rise up the black culture and things like that, things that
Right.
were done by other black athletes. Like we could name several,
Yeah.
but in terms of helping out the black community financially and entertainers and sports and sports athletes, he helped them a lot because he was the first athlete to have the crossover appeal to get all those commercial endorsements. The
Right.
most famous one is obviously the Hertz running through the airport
Right.
and the old lady saying, "Go OJ, go," and
Uh-huh.
he was so charming and good looking that that was, you know, a great commercial, and it was a very famous commercial. And then
Hmm.
that is Arthur Ashe got a little bit of that, but it was mainly OJ, and he was the first one. And once he showed the United States community and the advertising people that a black athlete could make you a lot of money and had crossover appeal if you had the right person, more black athletes got endorsements after that. So he
Hmm.
really did help the black community, even though he didn't do it on purpose. And
Right.
he and I think you could make the argument that he actually helped black entertainers that weren't athletes, that
Right.
opened the door, because there wasn't like black entertainers that weren't in sports were getting a bunch of commercial endorsements before then either.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. That's what I was saying. Yeah, I agree. That's at that point. Yeah, he did do that. At that point, yeah, he helped out a lot that way. But then, like I said, he kind of faded into, like you said, he wanted to be white.
He wanted to hang
And
out in the white community more, and because he either for whatever reason, might be because just for financial reasons, he knew he could make more money if he associated himself with the white community. And so I don't know what his thinking was. He did have, you know, black friends still, but he that was his persona anyways. Um, what was your feeling when you saw the trial, and if you were sitting on the jury, how would you have voted, guilty or not guilty?
I was in California at that time, and I remember exactly when I was at work. I worked in the San Francisco General Hospital in medical records, and I remember we were when us black employees was sitting there, and then we heard the verdict, and we all cheered that he didn't get convicted.
You
But if you
cheered.
ask me,
Would you have voted not guilty yourself if you were forced to sit on the jury for 9 months?
I don't know. I know. Yeah, after a while, I would have said anything. But no, I probably would have said the way the prosecution presented it, because that's what you do when you go to trial. You don't look at the way the prosecution. I think they blew it. They could have presented their evidence was not good. I would probably would have voted not guilty, not because he was black, but by going by the way they presented their evidence. I couldn't convict this guy with the
But
way he did it. They should have because they should have did better.
I can understand you and other blacks wanting to vote, you know, saying you would vote not guilty because you didn't say they presented enough evidence, or but I don't understand the cheering over it. Like that seems a little over the top
Well,
to me.
well, the reason why the cheering is, Mark, is because, as you know, unfortunately in our country, we've had trials with blacks being on trial, and then no matter what, even if the evidence was far against where the black person didn't do it, and they were still convicted, no matter what. The difference is still even to this day. I mean, there is a difference in the justice system.
I understand that
So,
perspective.
so for us, it was like, I mean, you see the signs, free OJ, but then afterwards, it's very funny. Comedian David Chappelle, he was doing a bit about OJ, and he had met him, and he's going on, and he goes, "I was talking to him, and I go, yeah, he did it," and we we know he did it. See, that's the whole thing. We probably said he did it.
Okay, let me ask you this: you said you would vote not guilty because you didn't think they presented the evidence, and you cheered when you got found not guilty. Do you think he killed those two people?
Yeah, I think he did.
At the time, is your view changed since the time of the trial to today in terms of how sure you are he killed two people?
I'm 100% he did it.
Were you 100% sure when you cheered that he killed two people and he got
Like,
found not guilty?
well, like I said, the cheering was not for. I mean,
I understand that, but that just
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
answer the question. Were you 100% sure at the time? Because some people's views have changed since then. Were you 100% sure you killed two people when you cheered?
I wasn't 100% back then. I would probably,
Okay,
yeah, I wasn't 100% back then, right?
okay. Um, all right, fair enough. And I understand. I can't. There's no way I can feel how you feel not being black. And I understand. And I'm going to get into
Yeah,
some of that.
from your perspective of the, I hate using color, but I mean from the white view, were you like right away? You knew that he did it right away. That he was
Yeah,
guilty.
I'm gonna get. Yeah, I wanted you to go first because you had. I think your perspective is different because you're black and OJ's black. But I, at first, I had no idea. I just saw that there seems to be a lot of circumstantial evidence, and then they started starting some physical evidence and blood and forensics, and immediately I was this is my perspective. People don't actually, most people watching this don't know, just family and friends. I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I was like 3 years into my criminal defense career at the time, so I was pretty knowledgeable at that point. It was already 3 years in, and I could tell right away that at that point that he was guilty as hell. There was no question in my mind when the evidence, was like, and I'll get into this, but he was like one of my childhood sports heroes. So it was disturbing to say the least.
Did you feel disappointed? Did you feel disappointed? People have this hero worship. Did you feel disappointed that he did this, or?
I was very disappointed, and he's the only athlete. He disappointed me more than any other athlete in my lifetime by a far margin. Especially since he seemed so likable and he was so great. And he turns out, in my opinion, I'll get to that, I think he was underrated as a running back, amazingly. But that when that happened, I could see there was problems with the case when they presented it. No problem. They had chain of command problems. They had Mark Furman problems with obviously, you could show he was obviously biased, but there was no indication to me from the evidence that the glove was planted or that anything like that. It seemed to me, and it didn't even need to be, because the blood was in the circumstantial evidence about where he was at the time and what happened was overwhelming to me. So to me, it didn't rise to the level of reasonable doubt. It was clear to me that he did. I was 100% sure, no matter how many problems there was with the case, I was 100% sure he did it by the time they presented all the evidence.
So do you feel that the prosecutors messed up on it, or do you?
Everybody thinks the prosecution. No one says everyone saes they did a lousy job. First of all, they overtried the case, so they presented too much evidence. I was taking a continuing education course for how to do how to try a case, and they said, okay, here's an O.J. Simpson case, and he goes, this is some guy had a receipt, had something to do with, I don't know, going to the store or something like that. It was like a 1/1000th of the case, and he said all they need to do is ask 2 questions and put them on the stand and over with. And it took a couple hours worth of stuff, just a receipt having to do with something. I forget what it was. And and it's just an example how they overtried the case. It lasted 9 months. It should have lasted a month. And they obviously shouldn't have had him try on the gun, not the gun, try on the gloves. And I can tell you that we grew up in Rochester, New York, and we have a lot of snow there. And I already knew that gloves, if you get them soaked and stuff like that, and then maybe if you put them over heat or whatever, they could shrink. So I already knew it wasn't a good idea.
Right.
And even then I wouldn't have anyways, because all you had to say is the size were extra large gloves, and OJ had large hands, and that was enough. That's all you had to do. You didn't have to put the gloves on.
They wanted to show, and then, like I said, Cochran has turned it right around and says, haha. So, and then, the trial had so many different sayings that people still, we talked to somebody, like you said, if it doesn't fit, you got to quit. He had these little quirky things, and people.
It was a great line.
People ate that up. He hit a lot of things.
The jury had their mind made up almost from the beginning. As you know, it was almost all black jury. And I think if you don't know that, right before that was the Rodney King incident.
Yes,
the Rodney King incident helped OJ get a not guilty verdict. In addition to all the unfairness that were a lot of white jurors convicted innocent black defendants for no reason other than the fact they were black. Now, so that it was distrust between LA and the police there,
in the country
too. But that's where the case was tried. And they changed the forum from Brentwood, whatever town to LA County, which is how the case got lost. Because when you do the surveys, it was like 80% blacks thought he was innocent or not guilty. We'll get into that. And with whites, it was just the opposite. Just so you know, in a criminal case, you don't get found innocent in the United States. There's a couple countries that do it that way. You get found guilty or not guilty. And not guilty, people say innocent completely wrong. And it drives me crazy when the media does it, because they are educated enough to know it's wrong. Not guilty just means there wasn't enough evidence to prove that you were innocent. You don't get proved innocent in the American justice system, because being proved innocent is almost impossible. So they do have that exception, like I said.
The proof of guiltiness is on the state. not on the defense. So
Being not guilty means you could have been guilty. It could mean you're completely innocent. That's all it means. It means they couldn't prove your case. In Europe, they give you 3 choices, but it's really hard to distinguish between that. So it's not even necessary, because as long as you didn't get convicted, that's all you really care. Now, in terms of reputation wise, you'd rather be found innocent, but it's really hard to prove innocence. So
I mean, that's what happened. That's what happened
that way.
I'm sorry. That's what happened to him. So he was found not guilty, but then in a civil court, he got convicted and had to pay in a civil court.
Right. So I'll explain that. So in our justice system, there's 3 different standards. In civil, it's preponderance. More likely than not, that equals 51%. And then in certain civil cases, like family matters, like wills, trusts, restraining orders, things like that, taking someone off life support, they use clear and convincing evidence, because your civil liberties are involved and they think it's more important in the standards. That means it's highly probable that it took place, but it's it's higher than 51 and lower than beyond a reasonable doubt. And there's no percentage for clear and convincing or beyond a reasonable doubt, just for preponderance, because it's easy. It's more likely than not that equals 51%.
Right.
Beyond a reasonable doubt, I have no idea what percentage is. It's somewhere between 90 and 99%. Clear and convincing sounds to me like it's halfway in between. So it's like 70, 75, whatever. And then that's the standard. So he got found not guilty in criminal court. And then preponderance of evidence is all that required for civil. So even if it was a black jury, instead of it was mostly a white jury, I think he would have been found guilty in the civil trial, because the standard of proof was lower. And OJ took the stand, and he wasn't a good witness. And I remember, again, I was taking a CLE course, and the guy was involved in the civil case that was teaching the course. And he started about OJ, and they started asking about his interactions with his wife, and having to do with his, when they got called in for him beating his wife and stuff, and he started pounding the table a little bit when he was talking about these, his relationship with his wife. And he said that's where I think that the jury, after that it was over with. He said,
"Oh yeah, the pounding of the table is like,
Now, I will tell you also that Alan Dershowitz said, he should have been found not guilty because he was framed, and it has to do with the socks that were found in his, I think it was in his bedroom, because he obviously changed and then left the socks. And he said that there was this chemical that came from the vial that wasn't in human blood, that was there. But later in the civil trial, they found out that theory was not correct. And if they had known that at the criminal trial, it would have been better for the prosecution. They found out DNA was still new at that time, and stuff like that. It was a preservation there, but they show that couldn't happen. So
for me, in front of me. So for me, also from the black aspect of that, and very straight, OJ was not that smart. So we're sitting there, we're going, oh, so he planned this, he did this, and he put this thing, and then he did this step here, and then step 1, step 2, and we're going, he's not really that bright to really follow through and do all this kind of stuff. So that was part of the reason why we were like, he's not smart enough to do all that. It wasn't true, but that's what we were thinking. Thinking about him personally. He wasn't a smart person to all of a sudden just do this.
Right. Oh, so for instance, let's get back to the Rodney King thing so people can understand, because some people are too young for all this. So Rodney King was a guy who'd been arrested before, and he was in he did something wrong. I forgot what, but there was a high speed chase, like 100 miles per hour. And he put a lot of innocent lives at danger, because the cops, I don't know if the cops should have followed him at 100 miles per hour, but they did. And when they finally caught up with him, apparently he was on PCP, but they thought he acted crazy. But once he was on the ground, it didn't matter whether he acted crazy. It didn't look like he tried to get up and go crazy again, because then they had his knee on him. But they hit him, I think it was 56 or 58 times. And I would have given him the first 2 blows, but not the next 56. You know what I mean? And it was on tape. Yeah. So then they went to trial, and they claimed he was out of control, and you can tell from the video he wasn't, and he had calmed down by that point. So it was should have been a clear guilty. It was basically a white jury. I'm going to say the white jury was two parts to this. Is one, people tend to support the police in these cases. They don't like to convict the police for doing their job. But 2, they were white, and he was black, and he was not.
Wasn't the trial in Simi Valley, which is totally where police were?
Yeah, and But so he should have been found guilty, and I think the white jury there should have been probably influenced racially. I can't say they were all racist against blacks that voted not guilty, but because I said people vote, even everybody seems to vote for not guilty in these cases with the cops. They don't want to convict cops for doing their job.
Right.
But anyways, I can say there might have been some racialism, if that's a word. They were being racist by voting not guilty. But the black community was unbelievably upset, and rightfully so. And I understood the reaction to that completely. I don't understand pulling some white guy out of a truck and beating the crap out of him in the head that happened after that. But I can understand all the protests and all that. And I don't believe in violence, but I can understand why it took place.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what happened. And then what happened with this, I don't know if the next trial happened before or after OJ, but they found a loophole. So if you don't know double jeopardy, you can't try the person in the same court, like state court as opposed to federal court, for the same crime twice. Once you get found not guilty, that's it. That's it. They had their shot at it. So that's a pretty simple concept, except for the fact that it was in state court. And so in federal court, they said they violated civil rights, and they tried him as if it was kind of like the same type of thing, the same type of trial. And this time it was a fair verdict. The jury was much more variety.
More diverse.
It was a more diverse jury, and the evidence was now civil again. So now we're into civil. And I'm pretty sure they used preponderance in that particular case. But I'd have to look it up. I'd have to look up what the burden of proof was for that particular trial. But it was violated their civil rights, and you got a really fair verdict. The two main guys got found guilty and sentenced 10 years or more in jail. 10 years, maybe 10 to 20 or something like that.
10 to 20, yeah.
And then the ones that were less involved, they didn't find them guilty. And that was fuzzy whether or not they should have been. It was really two guys that did most of it. One guy even tried to stop him from doing it, and then he backed off. And so that's what happened with the trial. So people were really upset with that verdict because it seemed very racial to me and everybody else. Anybody who wasn't a white racist thought that verdict was totally unfair to the black defendant. And look, what he did was terrible. I mean, he put a lot of people's lives in danger, but fine. You can have a solution to that. You give him, hit him twice, whatever. Either way, you rough him up, but you don't beat him 56 times. And then when he goes to trial or pleads guilty, the judge can take that into consideration, and he has a guideline when he sentences him, and he can give him the higher part of the guideline and punish him for 100 miles per hour high-speed chase for life.
Yeah, I mean, I feel most policemen, I've had friends who are police officers, and most of them, like I said, when they're in a high-speed, you should never get in a high-speed chase with police, because
especially this guy wasn't a murder suspect. He was, I don't know what he did. I forgot what he did wrong. It was a traffic violation or something. But he wasn't a murder suspect.
That's a big thing down in LA anyway. They film it live on local TV. So, but I mean, you shouldn't do it, because once the police officers, they're all hyped up after that. When they catch you, it doesn't matter what color you are. When they catch you, after a high-speed chase,
I know
you're in trouble. I just want to say that.
I've spoken to cops. He goes, my rule is when they resist and run, he goes, they get a beating when I catch them. He goes, I don't do it anymore because of cameras on phones. He goes, but that's what I did my entire career.
Oh yeah.
It didn't matter whether the guy was white or black either. He said that's my rule.
That's just it.
So, anyways, and so that was my perspective on that. I would have, if I was on the jury, it would have been a hung jury, because I would have sat there for a year if I had to make sure I did the right thing. Because justice is justice. I can't, I understand from the black perspective. It was like, this is to make up for all the wrong convictions of blacks by whites. I understand that concept, but I don't know if I could have done that. I don't, even if I was black.
But,
I could have voted.
That's part of jury selection. I mean, that's what they asked. Can you be fair and impartial? So I don't think the prosecutors did a good job screening these people. When they said that, it's like, are you kidding me? Of course,
yeah. Like I said, I understand that just because there's some doubt, that's not enough for beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not all doubt. It's beyond a reasonable doubt, which is something you'd have to pause or hesitate when you're making an important decision in your life. And it just, to me, it didn't rise to that level. And it was clear it didn't, even though, they did a poor job with the case.
So do you think you think the civil court trial vindicated what it should have been actually in regular trial.
Yeah, but it's hard to compare because the standard of proof was different, right?
Right.
And
Okay.
then it didn't do him any good. I mean, he didn't get a lot of money from him. I think they got 133,000 instead of the 33 million. But the point was, is they put a lien on his certain things that he had. They couldn't go after his pension because it was protected.
Right.
So they went after his belongings and his assets, and one of them was his sports memorabilia stuff, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
what he was going after. So
Yes.
the civil verdict resulted in OJ going after stuff because he couldn't just go get it civilly, because if he sued for it civilly, there would have been a lien on it. It would have gone to the it would have gone to the Goldman's. I think it's just Goldman's suit. I don't
Yeah, I
think
think it was
Mark
Goldman's
Brown's.
and yeah, the
So
Goldman's.
that's what happened. It was ironic that the civil case actually did some good, but now he's got it in the state. I don't know if they're going to try to go after his estate or not. Now that he's died, I wouldn't surprise me if they
Well, that's
did. I
I
don't
guess
even know
that's
if
what
they can.
caused that's what caused him to go to jail the next time trying to get that back. So
Right. So and so what happened was, is again, and most people probably know, though, he got convicted of armed robbery, kidnapping, and conspiracy.
yeah.
And I can tell you, he didn't really, other than I guess the domestic violence, which was kind of like, I don't even know if it was even a convicted misdemeanor. I think it was like it was more like a summary offense because it was a plea. So he basically had a prior record score of 0. So if you don't know, there's like a chart and there's a graph in it. The higher your prior record score, the higher the charge that you have, you're going to get a higher thing, and then slower down here. And it's like little chart and graphs and stuff like that. And it determines that it goes up like this. So he had a prior record score of 0. So whatever the penalty was is going to be lower for that particular thing. So I think in his case, a common thing, at least in Pennsylvania, he would have got 5 to 10 would have been the sentence. 5 to 10 in state prison. That's what you get for armed robbery, usually, unless there's extenuating circumstances. And this judge found a way to give him, it was a weird sentence, like 9 to 23. I don't know where she came up with that, but that's what she probably was trying to give him as much as possible and found ways to justify the 9-year minimum and the 3-year maximum. You're thinking, but I think it was an unfair sentence. I think he should have got 5 to 10. It was definitely armed robbery, even though it was a weird circumstance. That's what he did. He put these people in fear, and he tried to take something that he didn't have a right to at that point. So I think he got 4 years in jail extra for being found not guilty in the other trial. But the sentence and the verdict, I think, was fair. I actually think.
So you were talking about, like, the question I asked you is when it happened, you were disappointed and because you idolized the guy, and that's kind of like how blacks felt with. I mean, I'm sorry to pick another case, but like Bill Cosby, he did a lot back then for blacks, and he was always involved in civil rights and things. And he was actually, when he had his show, he was like the father of TV, and then all of a sudden you get these things that happened in the past. So, I mean, also, even though we cheered, unfortunately, and this is a weird reaction. I don't know if you know about this. Whenever blacks hear like any kind of, like, I say, like a major crime or something, we almost like sit there like, oh, I hope he's not black. I hope this, and then you're like,
I understand.
black, and if he's black, you're like, oh.
Listen, I understand from your perspective about the cheering, but the part that bothers me is 2 innocent people. I don't care what race they were, what case OJ
Right.
died, and a person got away with something, to me, that was obvious that he did, and then that he should have been found guilty, in my opinion. So that's the part that I have with you. You're cheering a person that killed 2 people that got away with it. That's why I couldn't cheer. I don't think, even if I was black, I might have been happy with the verdict because they didn't, take down a black celebrity, but I don't think I could cheer. But I don't know, because I'm not black. So that's why I asked you. I'm trying to be, like I said, I can't understand it.
But we're like you. I mean, here he is, this idol, and all of a sudden he did this, and we're the same way. We're disappointed. We're shocked. We're like, oh man, what are you doing? What that just brings another thing on to us. Like, okay, oh yeah, he's black. He's, of course. So we're like, oh great, thank you, OJ.
And everything in his behavior after that indicated he was guilty. With his
I
did a book that stupid, that was like, it ended up that they didn't publish that, and the publisher got fired, and then the Goldmans got some of the profits from the book, or maybe all the profits. I don't know. That's what I read. So, but again, and it sold pretty well, so he got some money. That was probably, I don't know how much of the 133,000 was from the book, but it seemed like they should have got more money if they got money from the book. But that's my feeling about OJ in terms of, what you have to think about first is someone who did that. But from a football perspective, I'd like to get into that just a little bit, because I don't think you can just ignore that completely just because
Right.
he's a pariah and he killed 2 people. You can't say, well, he wasn't a football player. You
Right.
can't say he wasn't a great running back and just say it didn't
Exactly.
exist, because it did.
Yeah.
It's part of it. So we saved it for last, to be fair, because I think that murder conviction, lack of murder conviction and killing 2 innocent people has to override everything. I can't watch his highlights anymore the same way I could before. I can't think of his accomplishments the same way I could before.
Well, for me, when his buddy Al Collins, with the white Bronco during the basketball playoffs, that really annoyed me. Like, excuse me, get rid of this. I don't care about this. You're messing up my game. I'm trying to watch the pro game. You talk about sport.
All right, I know. I was actually watching that because I was into basketball a lot then because of Michael Jordan, who just retired. But
yeah,
Michael Jordan got me really into basketball even more than I was before.
Yeah, I'm watching the
I was
game.
watching that game.
Watching the game. OJ's being a white Bronco. I'm like, who cares? I'm trying to watch the game.
People were fascinated by that. If you don't know, they actually broke away from the end. I mean, all the other networks obviously were going to follow it, but NBC broke away from the game and started showing the case instead of the NBA Finals.
I'm like, I don't even care.
It was for real.
Yeah.
So
who cares?
They chased him, and he finally gave himself up. He had a gun, he had a wig, he had money.
They were worried about him.
He was obviously running. He was guilty, and that they never put that in the trial when they should have. Yeah, they were afraid. They had a reason why. I forget what it was, but that was a mistake not to put that in the trial. I don't think it would have made any difference.
Well, they were thinking he might commit. They were thinking because he had a gun, he might commit suicide. And I'm going like, where are you going in L.A.? 2 black people and a white Bronco. Those white. Do you know the sales
from Mexico or something?
The sales for what? The sales for the Bronco went up after that, which is so
really?
typical American.
I did not know that.
It's so typical America. The sales for white Broncos went up after that.
So my problem with the not guilty verdict is that he spent a year in jail during the trial, and then he spent 9 years later. He spent 10 years in jail, and he should have spent 30 years in jail. He should have been in jail since 1994. And and I feel sorry for the Goldmans and the Browns and their family and friends, because he should have been in jail and he should have been convicted. And just imagine the feeling of that family, knowing that the evidence was overwhelming in their viewpoint and he didn't get convicted. So not only do they think he did it, they think the evidence was overwhelming. He should have been convicted. And, Ron Goldman was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. We don't know whether he had any kind of sexual relations with Nicole Brown. We just know he was called a friend and he brought the sunglasses over. He could have just been someone they met recently as a friend. And
there's a lot of stuff into that. I mean, she was in the drugs also. They brought that up,
Yeah, it wasn't that as heavy as they made it seem.
No, but I mean, she was doing drugs, which is, I guess, a typical thing. Whatever, if you're famous.
But the bottom line is OJ was a sports star. He wasn't a big sports star until he became a junior at USC, but he was 19.
Oh, no. I'm sorry to correct. Let me correct you. When he was in San Francisco, and he went to Galileo. I think he went to Gal High School. I have to look checking.
I know he was a high school star.
He didn't go directly into college. He transferred.
I know he went there. He went to another school for 2 years.
He went to CCSF community college first, and then he went to USC.
Right, that's what I was saying. His junior year, he didn't go to USC his senior. I knew that.
Yeah.
So I was saying is he. I thought my train of thought. Oh.
You were talking about he was a star.
Oh yeah, he was a star in high school. Obviously, he had to be a hard star in high school, but it wasn't like a superstar status. But he was a star athlete, so he had entitlement issues that a lot of star athletes did. Yeah, and so when he got rejected by Nicole at some point when she wanted to get divorced, his big ego couldn't handle it. He was used to getting whatever he wanted, his
Yeah.
whole life, or at least since he was a junior in college when he became
Yeah,
a big
that's
star.
a lot of these athletes like that, especially now. Oh my
Right.
gosh, like, you see the Ray Rice, my gosh, but these guys they're in, I mean I coach, like I said, I coach AAU, but it's luckily it's changed from when I was recruiting or trying to get players for my team. I didn't have to do all that. It's changed so much. I talked to one of my former players, and with his son who's playing basketball, and his other son's playing
Right.
football, and it's just amazing how it's these kids like are built up, and how we'll probably they get shoes, free
Mm-hmm.
shoes, and all this kind of thing, and they get to travel after in tournaments. So yeah, their concept as far as how you're brought up, is like very entitled. Like, okay, if you get your way, that's the way it is. You get your
Right.
way.
So let's go talk about his football career,
Mm.
because I think you can't, it was such a great career that you need to
Oh yeah,
talk about.
you can't gloss it over. No.
Right. He ended up being an MVP and player of the year several times. So I I was a Packers fan. I grew up in Rochester, New York, like I said, and there was no sports team there, and especially in the NFL at the time, because AFL had the Buffalo Bills, but nobody followed them because it was a new league. And so I became a Packers fan because they were winning, and I liked Paul Hornung and Bart Starr and all that stuff. And then I saw Gale Sayers on TV, and that's when I decided when I started really loving watching sports, because it was so exciting to watch Gale Sayers run. He might have been the most exciting runner ever. And then I watched games with my dad, and I watched USC played UCLA, and he had this game deciding 64-yard touchdown run, which is a famous run.
Yeah.
And then the next year, and he was runner up in the Heisman Trophy. Maybe he should have won it. It was a quarterback, I forget his name. It begins with B or T. And he had no career whatsoever in the NFL. So then he won it the next year, and he lost his last game against Ohio State when number 2 USC played Ohio State, but he had 171 yards and a 90-yard touchdown run. So I remember those two runs, because I was with my dad. We just looked at each other, and then it turns out Buffalo got the number 1 pick, and we were like, "Yeah, we're gonna watch this exciting running back."
Right.
And they drafted him, obviously. He was that good, but it was clear back then the running backs were more important in the NFL than they are today. So it was a big deal. And they had 2 coaches in the next 3 years and no offensive line. And it was very frustrating to watch. They were on, like I said, they were on TV every week on the NFL and NBC channel for the AFL, which is just turning into the AFC at the time. And it was so frustrating because you knew what he did in college. There's a gap between college and pros. We all know that. But the gap wasn't that big for a great guy like that. And also, you get better when you get in the pros. And running backs can be great their rookie years because their body isn't broken down yet.
Right.
And it was so frustrating that he couldn't do the offense. He'd go and there would be no hole whatsoever. There'd be nothing, for him to take advantage of. So he had, I think he missed 6 games too in his second year, but he averaged like 4 yards a carry.
Plus, they played in the stadium they called the Rock, which I went there. It was this horrible stadium where you would run, and then all of a sudden there'd be a girder in the way, and you couldn't really see where the players were, if you sat, depending where you sat. So until they built what eventually Rich Stadium, it was kind of like, oh.
So he averaged about 4 yards a carry, which was awful for him, and around 600 something yards I read. So I didn't really figure it out, but and then he, only a few touchdowns that he had. He only had a few touchdowns and no runs over longer than 56 yards in his first 3 years. So it was pretty bad that he was doing. He had like 2 touchdowns and 5 touchdowns and 5 touchdowns. That's it. And he was capable of more. So they fired the second coach. They fired one coach after 2 years, and the other one coach only lasted a year. And they were like worst record in the league basically for 3 years. And they hired Lou Saban, who was I don't know his whole background, but he was a good coach. And Lou Saban changed everything. He built up the offensive line and made him the focal point of the offense, which what the other 2 idiots should have done in the first place.
Right.
And immediately he gained over 1,000 yards, 1251. He gained his yards per carry only went up a little, but he had a lot more carries, 4.3. But the next year he gained 2,003 yards, and in just 14 games. He was the first person to ever do that. Even Jim
Yeah.
Brown didn't do that, although Jim Brown's half of his career was 12.
Yeah,
Only 12.
the offensive line actually was called the Electric Company.
Right. And it was a good offensive line. No
They were
excuses for anything after after
Jim
that.
Delamillaire, yeah.
Right. And it was a really good offensive line. And he also averaged 6 yards a carry. And so it was really an unbelievable. It was like night and day in terms of what he was able to accomplish. He had 12 TDs. He had those years. He had a 94-yard run and 80-yard run, because that's what you looked for. You knew he was capable of that.
Oh yeah, really
and they're so exciting to see that.
Uh-huh.
And he got injured the next year, so kind of went down. And then the next year, he had another great year, 1,800 yards and 5.5 yards a carry. Anyway, so he had a great career, and then he got injured and he got traded to San Francisco, and he was a shell of himself, just like Gale Sayers, his last year or two. But he ended up with over 11,000 yards and averaged 4.7 yards a carry, which is 0.3 yards more than Walter Payton and Eric Dickerson. Emmitt Smith is only like 4.2 or something like that, but he got a lot of yards. So, I did a video of greatest running backs of all time for my ultimaterankings.com. Ultimate Rankings website, by the way. I have that. I don't make videos anymore, but I did it. And I ranked him fourth after Jim Brown, who averaged 5.22 yards a carry, and Barry Sanders and Gale Sayers, who each averaged 5 yards a carry. And I think OJ would have averaged 5 yards a carry if he hadn't wasted his first 3 years, because the first 3 years are usually the best 3 years of a running back because their body hasn't broken down yet.
Right.
They don't really need a lot of experience to be a running back. They need to be quick and powerful.
Yeah, get to that hole and just go. Yeah.
And he had several injuries in his career, but you could see what he was capable of. He just had, a decent coach and a decent offensive line. He was that talented. Gale Sayers was so exciting because he was quick, agile, and fast. But OJ was bigger. OJ was 15 pounds heavier and 2 inches taller. So he was more powerful than Gale Sayers.
And he was fast because he ran track. So so he was fast once you get out there. Once you got out through the hole, it's hard to catch him.
So, and Jim Brown, wasn't quite as fast as OJ and Gale Sayers, but he was fast and he was very powerful. And that's why Jim Brown, statistically, he led the league 8 out of 9 times. That's why you can call him the greatest running back of all time. But the most exciting running backs of all time to me were Barry Sanders, Gale Sayers, and OJ Simpson.
Yeah, exactly. You got it right. Yeah.
And he was shifty. He was fast, quick. He wasn't as agile, like I said, not as agile as Gale Sayers, but no one was. No one had that. Gale Sayers, you say, just give me 18 inches of inches of daylight, and I'm there. I'm gone. And if you watch his highlights, you'll know it's true. Gale Sayers. Unfortunately, right about that time, Gale Sayers got injured for the first time and was never the same player. And like I said, Chicago wasn't on TV much in Rochester, New York anyway. So I needed a replacement for the sports junkie that I was. That I loved watching running backs at that time. And so OJ filled that void, especially once they got an offensive line for me. So he became, because that was my favorite thing at the time, until Julius Erving and Michael Jordan came around and showed how exciting basketball players can be. They weren't as exciting as he was. Connie Hawkins was a little bit, but they showed how exciting basketball. Running backs was my favorite athlete to watch. And so OJ, up there, he, top 3.
Yeah, when I went to the basketball camp, and that's where the training camp was, the Bills in Niagara University. That's where I went for my basketball camp, and to see, like you say, you see your idols or whatever, but to see OJ Simpson, it's just you get chills. You're like, oh my gosh, that's OJ Simpson. Jeez.
Yeah, and if you don't know, he actually averaged 143 yards per game the year that he got 2,000 yards, which is amazingly 10 yards more than any other running back for a full season. That's a lot. And so, and he 120, almost 130 yards that 2 years later when he was healthy again. So
and then the way he ran through the airport, it was amazing. I don't know the way he avoided those chairs,
the luggage and the chairs and the couches that he drew. But that's why that old lady was excited when she said, "No, OJ, go!
No, OJ, go!"
So, like I said, he seemed like he was a great, exciting running back. He seemed like a terrific guy until he killed 2 people and got away with it. And that's really the way I would sum up my feelings about him. But for those, I once saw an article that said, he was overrated because the guy wasn't even old enough to have seen him play. He just went, you only had this many yards, and he only had so many seasons where he had over 1,000 yards. Well, he didn't know that he was injured in 1970. He was injured in 1974. Then he was injured again in 77. He was playing injured a lot of times with leg injuries. So that's why, and then he probably didn't know the history behind the fact that he had a terrible offensive line and a terrible coach for the 3 most important years of his career. So I laughed when I read that, because that just shows a guy that didn't know, and he didn't see him. Maybe he didn't see him. I looked up the writer. He wasn't old. You got to go by the eye test too with any athlete. So when you watch him run, you can see, I say he had the potential to be the greatest running back of all time. I'm not saying he was or proved it. I'm saying he should have averaged around 5 yards a carry, like Gale Sayers and Barry Sanders.
But just look how long it took to even try to come close to his record of 2000. Look how long it took for them to even come close to that.
And then he had 16 yards, 16 games.
Yeah.
So exactly. I'm not saying he is the greatest running back of all time, but you can make that argument that if he didn't waste his first 3 years, he would.
I agree with your ranking. He's definitely fourth. Definitely.
So that's my feeling on OJ. It's very mixed feelings. Like I said, you can tell him how I talk about his football ability, how much joy I got watching him run. Yeah. But at the same time, I can't. All I can think about is the fact that he was an evil person, in the sense that he killed 2 people. For no reason other than jealousy or rejection.
Exactly. For him to digress to that point where he would have to kill 2 people over, like I said, rejection. It's kind of it's really sad, but sad for the family. I agree with you. Sad for families. I've been through personally a trial about that. That's a personal thing, but I mean, it's the effect on the family. And then, like I said, when you might, like you're same way, you grew up in the same era I did. You're a reflection of what your family is. So your reflection on your family. So if you do something, it's going to come back not just on you, it's going to come back on your family. And then he let down the black community. Here was this famous black guy, like you said, that's really got us in the door. And now and gave opportunities to other people, entertainers, actors. And here you are. And then all of a sudden you did this. You're like, oh, man.
It is disappointing, but you know what? He's dead now.
Yeah.
And, that's I like I said, I hope the Goldmans and the Browns help a little bit. The fact that he's not alive anymore, it's not going to bring their Nicole or Ron Goldman back, but maybe there's some sense of closure for them. I don't know.
I don't know if it's a closure, because then now it's going to come back up, because people are going to be talking about it again. So I don't know if it's closure, but it's not really like a closure. I mean, for them, it's a closure too late. I mean, they
probably wish he died of cancer. By the way, people don't know. They probably wish he got the cancer in 1995. So he would have died of that, and he would have had a death penalty. I don't believe in the death penalty, but I think he should have been in jail for 30 years.
Yeah, that would have been
Anyway.
All right.
That's our feelings on OJ. You got a white-black perspective, and you learned about his career that gets overshadowed by that. And I said, I think underrated, partially because they didn't watch him run, or they didn't understand like the first 3 years, like I said a couple times now, and also because of the fact that he killed 2 people and got away with it, people started looking, I think, underrated how good he was. He was the best player in NFL for that decade, and the most important player.
Yes, he was.
Because running backs were more important back then. So that's pretty huge. So anyways, thanks a lot for listening. Tell us how you feel, whether you're white or black or not, how you feel about his career, how you feel about his influence on culture and society and race and everything like that. And we'd like to hear it. It's very interesting to me how people feel about that. It's very complicated. Like Bob Costa said, it's complicated. It's more than complicated, but that's an understatement. Exactly. So we'd like to hear about it. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thanks a lot for listening, and like and subscribe, and we appreciate you. All right.
Yep. All right. Peace out.